Terrance to the stage.
My name is Terrance Woodbury. I am a pollster and strategist, and because I work with data, I don't know how to speak without slides. So give me 1 second for those to come up. Here we go. All right. I am really excited to be here. Look, I'm going to talk to a little bit of my work and my bio, how we got, and the company and the kind of work that we do. But I'm also not lost on the moment that we're in, that as a pollster for the Kamala Harris campaign, many of you have questions about how the hell we got here. I am still trying to answer some of those questions myself. I'm going to answer as many of them as I can here. But I want to start with just a little bit about the work that we do and why we do it. So I went to Morehouse, as Jenna said, my work was kind of rooted in Atlanta. I went to Morehouse College. While at Morehouse, I started working for a little-known state senator named Kasim Reed. He told me he wanted to run for mayor. Everyone told him he was crazy. I was like, look, I'm crazy too, let's do it. He was at 3%. All of his opponents were at like 23 and 18, and that guy became mayor. And that really did launch my career in politics. That was the first job I ever had in politics. I was a canvasser for Kasim Reed, literally knocking on doors. And then, he elevated me to become to organize college campuses, young people, LGBTQ folks. And that is the basis of my work. My work is, my number one commitment, my number one allegiance is not to the Democratic Party. Frankly, it is not even to a progressive ideal. My allegiance is to the tribes that I am a part of. I am black, I am gay, I am millennial, I am first generation. That is who my allegiances are to. I am for anyone that can advance those tribes. I am for any cause that can advance those tribes. And so that's how I started getting into this work. I worked on a bunch of campaigns here in Atlanta before I got a call from Kasim Reed's line brother when he was at Howard, was running for Prime Minister of the Bahamas. And Kasim was like, look, I got this kid here who just helped me get elected. Maybe he can help you. I moved to the Bahamas for 2 years, ran the Prime Minister's race there. Then I went to Trinidad and ran the Prime Minister's race there. Then I went to Jamaica and ran the Prime Minister's race there. When I say ran the race, I mean like literally all 32 constituencies. They're parliamentary, so you got to win the most seats in a parliament to become Prime Minister. Ran all 32 parliamentary campaigns, and I was like 25 years old, y'all. This is crazy. I don't know why they gave me this much authority, but it was fun, and I realized that I loved it, that I loved organizing people, that I loved creating strategy and driving a message and using all of the levers of media and communications to do that, mail and TV and radio and every microphone that we could turn on, every bullhorn that we can grab, any way of promoting that message. But I also realized doing all of this work that everything was kind of deferring back to the polling. Kasim's campaign referred back to the polling. When I started working in the Bahamas, they had pollsters, and I kept wondering, who are all the pollsters, and like, what's behind the curtain? Where does these magic numbers come from that we all have to defer to? And when I pulled that curtain back, I realized there wasn't a lot of people back there that looked like me or that came from my tribes, and that's why my tribes were often underrepresented and misrepresented. And so then I started, getting really, really interested in research. I went to University of Maryland to learn survey methodology, to learn polling. I joined the Brookings Institution, the most premier research institution in the world. I was there for 3 years. I was a research assistant for a lady there named Amy Liu. She ran a little program there called the Metropolitan Policy Program. The smartest person I've ever worked for in my life. Amy Liu was a genius. She taught me rigorous research. She taught me data analytics. She also went on to become the president of the Brookings Institution. And then I got, again, I was looking for folks in the polling industry that looked like me or that came from any of the tribes I was from, whether they were black or young or gay or just any of my tribes. And they were hard to find. There was one guy named Cornell Belcher. I always describe him as that black guy on MSNBC with the white afro and the really nice suits. He ran a company called Brilliant Corners, and he recruited me from Brookings, and I went there, and he said, if you want to be a pollster, stop going to school to learn polling and come and start polling. And so I went to his company, and I stayed there for 5 years before starting Hit Strategies. We started Hit Strategies 5 years ago, 2019, me and my partner, Roshni Netangadi. I cannot believe this. It's now a company of almost 50 of the youngest and most diverse researchers in the country. We work across the progressive landscape. We work with a bunch of the establishment, first of all, I should say, we specialize in the communities that are the most underrepresented. Young people, people of color, LGBTQ folks. Our very first client at Hit Strategies was the Transgender Law Center. And that's when I knew that we were doing the right work. That we were finally researching issues and people and audiences that were not being explored in polling. So while we work with a bunch of the establishment organizations, the DNC, the DCCC, the DSCC, all those four-letter words in Washington, and even the Harris campaign, which I am incredibly honored by, and incredibly proud of the campaign that she ran, even with the flaws of 107 that happened in 107 days. I'm extremely proud of that. Obviously, my partner, Roshni Netangadi, is Indian American, and so we always saw Kamala Harris as like the identity embodiment of me and her and the candidate that we had to work for, even in 2020 when she was only one of the 20 candidates on stage, and we were working with Tom Steyer, who I always say is like a good billionaire. He's like one of the good ones. We always knew that she was the candidate that best represented our identity and our experience. And so this year we had the opportunity to work with her. I want to correct, I was joking with Tara and Jenna that after every election, I find myself defending this entire industry and should it exist. And so I would like to do that here. Look, there's a couple things I want to say about polling. Actually, before I do that, I just want to talk a little bit about who we work with, because I think it does give us the perspective and the vantage that's a little bit different than the polls that are often represented in the news. Look, while we do work with all those four-letter organizations, we also work with the movement, right? We work with ACLU, we work with NAACP, we work with Campaign Zero, Black Lives Matter Global Network, National Black Justice Coalition, HRC, Transgender Law Center. We work with the communities that are on the front lines of the tribes that we care about. And that gives us a different perspective, and that allows us to bring that perspective into these very establishment organizations. We also do quite a bit of health equity work. This kind of happened by accident. I also believe, I told you, my allegiance is to my tribes and not to any issue or any organization, which means that sometimes I believe in taking bad money to do good things. Progressives hate me for that, but when people of color were expressing vaccine hesitancy, and even an organization like Pharma that does awful shit in this world, that even when Pharma came to us and said, we need help figuring out why some folks won't take this vaccine, then I took their money, and I did 20 focus groups. This is the only time I've ever been able to afford to do indigenous focus groups. That is extremely expensive and hard work. We took their money, we did their work, and we helped get jabs into arms. We helped close those vaccine hesitancy gaps. We helped understand how Tuskegee experiment creates even trust gaps for clinical trials and for clinical trials, for vaccines, for trust gaps for the entire health industry. And I'm proud of that work too. But I do want to correct the record on a couple things before I talk about some of the polling. Because there are good uses and bad uses of polling. And oftentimes, what we see, and the only time most people see polling is when it is reporting a horse race. Which candidate is winning today? That's normally the only time people see polling. Well, that's actually the worst use of polling, right? The bad use of polling is trying to predict. Good use of polling is trend line. A good use of polling is understanding how attitudes and behavior are changing over time, right? The trend line over time. That's a good use of polling. Bad use of polling, horse race, trial heat. Who is winning today versus yesterday? Predicting and using that to predict who's going to win 6 months from now. That is a terrible use of polling, and that is how the media normally uses it. Good use of polling, what is important to people, and what are their attitudes around those issues? That's a good use of polling and focus groups, sitting in rooms and asking them what's important to you and why. Bad use of polling is taking that information and trying to conform yourself into what people say is important to them. And I think that is the perception that most people have of polling, is that it is, people take these numbers and then say what the poll says and try to become what the poll says is important. Well, in fact, that is what voters see right through. A part of Donald Trump's appeal to so many people is not that they agree with him, is that they see him as authentic. They see him as saying what he means and being who he is, and not conforming that to public interest, not conforming that to public polling. And so when you take a poll and try to conform to it, you're in fact misusing that poll, and voters are going to see through it. Skip the rest of that. All right, I'm gonna skip through some of this. Look, some of the hot takes of the election, I just want to be honest with you, we don't have enough data to say exactly what happened and why, and anyone that is trying to prescribe that to you is probably wrong. They're giving you their opinion. I talk about the data. I don't talk about my opinion. I talk about the opinion of the voters we talk to, and we just don't have enough of their opinions yet. But there's a couple things that I do want to give you, because some of this data is already coming out. This is from pre-election, when we were talking about what we learned from the 2022 cycle and what it would mean for the 2024 cycle. A couple of things that are still relevant here. It wasn't the economy, it was the cost. It was never about the economy, it was always about the cost. This was not an economy election, it was a cost election. It was always cost. We've been saying that since 2022. Look, every election is about the economy. Every election, economy is the number one issue. The problem is that that word means something different in every election, right? In 2008, economy meant foreclosures and unemployment. In 2012, economy meant tax and spending. That was the rise of the Tea Party, right after the bailout, right after, Occupy movement. It meant who's being taxed and how are we spending it. In 2020, economy meant reopen from the pandemic. In 2024, economy meant cost, not inflation. It meant the cost of things is too high. Number two, men of color, who I believe are emerging as the swing voters. I believe men of color and young people are emerging as the swing voters. I'm going to show you that on a couple of slides. But men of color in particularly are less motivated by attacks on social issues. Abortion was a big exception to that, especially in 2022. But we have to reclaim some of these progressive issues and reshape how we are discussing them. And this is where I get, how do I say this? Let me just read it from the slide. We have to message progressive issues through POC values. I hate acronyms like POC, but bear with me for a second. Because we have allowed Republicans, we've allowed the right, this is C3, we have allowed the right to own values that are very, very important to men of color. We've allowed them to own values like patriotism. I had a young man tell me in a focus group here in Georgia that anytime he sees an American flag on someone's house, he knows they're white and he knows they're Republican. My father cries every time he hears the national anthem, to this day. He is a captain in the reserves to this day. He served this country. We can't allow the right to own patriotism. We've allowed them to own masculinity. Newsflash, it is not all toxic. There is a good role of masculinity in society. I don't know what progressives believe that role is yet. We have to define it. We have to display it. We have to reclaim it. We cannot wag our finger at it. Spirituality. We've allowed the right to own God. I want to be very clear about those three things. Spirituality, masculinity, patriotism, family. All four of those things are more important to my father than the Democratic Party. If we allow the right to own all of those values, they will lose my father, who has never voted for anybody but Democrats his whole life. They will lose him, and we are beginning to, and I'm going to show you that. There are there are ways to wrap our progressive issues in these values. There's a couple of examples here. If God grants us all freedom of choice, then why should government grant women any less than that? As the head of my household, I must protect my family from governments who try to tell them who they can and cannot be, right? Those are very progressive issues of identity, of sexuality, of abortion, that we can use the values that are already most important to them, to us, to reclaim some of those issues. But also, even if they're not with us on every single one of those issues, it does not mean we throw them away, right? I just watched this party and a campaign that I work for chase Republicans around the country with Liz Cheney for weeks to claim voters that didn't agree with us on anything except for not Trump. We were willing to invest millions of dollars chasing those voters. Millions of dollars. But a black man who has concerns about a woman being president, but agrees with us on everything else, who is left of America on every other issue, we wag our finger at him. And we say he's not our voter. As opposed to having a conversation with these men to bring them along the progressive journey. When have we ever explained to men of color why pronouns are important? When have we ever explained? Look, when Barack Obama realized, I heard these concerns in every focus group. Concerns about a woman being president. Not from everybody, but there was always at least one person. And here's what I would do, right? Because people don't like to express socially undesirable behavior, like sexism. And so what I would do is say, okay, even if nobody here has concerns about a woman being president, do you know anyone that has concerns about a woman being president? Every hand goes up, right? You got to give them a proxy. But here's the thing. Not everyone that has concerns about a woman being president is sexist. Some of it is just the patriarchal society they've been raised in. Some of it is my church, my Bible, my God told me that the man is head of household. When Barack Obama, in 2008, when Barack Obama recognized that racism, this was right around the you all might remember this, right around the Jeremiah Wright controversy, when he realized that racism could undermine his candidacy, he didn't wag his finger at white people and say, shame on you for being racist, because he would not have won. He had a conversation with America about how even his grandmother, who he loved more than anybody in the world, held bias, and how this is a moment for the country to move beyond that, for the country to be better than that. When did we have that conversation with men of color about sexism? Or did we just wag our finger at them? When did we say to men of color, I understand what you believe, and what you believe isn't even bad. If that's what your religion tells you, I'm not here to tell you that your God is wrong. I'm here to tell you that society is evolving. There's a place for you in it. That gender is evolving, and your masculinity isn't wrong. But gender is evolving, and there's a place for you in it. I'm getting my time checked, so I'm going to have to move on a little bit. But I had to spend a little bit of time there because there's about to be a battle, not just in the country, but in the party, about, you already hear it, the reason we lost is identity politics. You already hear it happening, right? There's a whole battle right now over who's going to lead this Democratic Party. That will be the basis of the battle. And so I just want to reorient that there is a way to be a big tent party that holds progressive values and that does not dismiss and throw away the people that we are going to need to actually be a big tent party. We can't be a big tent party that only invites people who lead with their pronouns. We're going to leave a lot of people out of our tent. We're going to leave my father out of our tent. He is never going to lead with his pronouns. He will respect yours. He'll respect mine. But we can't win without him and all of the men that are like him. I'm going to skip some of this. Oh, God, I really want to do this. Okay, so this is one of the projects that we just worked on. In fact, no, I got to skip this because I want to tell you about the election. Okay, no, I'm not going to skip this. It's too important. Okay. One of the projects that we work on, and this is, again, good use of polling, right? This is after over 10,000 interviews with black folks, understanding that the black community is not a monolith, understanding that just demographics of gender and age may not be enough to explain the real nuances that are happening. After 10,000 interviews, we created this segmentation of black voters that created 5 distinct groups of black voters. We've done this with working class voters. We're trying to do it next year with the young people who I believe are, guys. Okay, before I do this, young people. Millennials and Gen Z are no longer the margins of the electorate. They are the electorate. They are the biggest voting bloc. They are the most diverse voting bloc. They are not the future. They are right now. And we have not figured this out. What I just saw young people do in this last election is dizzying. I mean, young people who agree with us on every issue, who are concerned about racism, abortion, and climate change and guns, and vote for Trump. I mean, we have to figure this out. They are our voters, and we are losing them overwhelmingly. A part of this is like, a part of being the most diverse demographic is that, they're already majority minority. They lead with their identity in politics. It's not a question of like identity or economy or, identity is that is their politics. And there's something happening with young white people in particular. Because I don't think I have the slide here, but young white people are voting more like white people than young people. And it is going to be a problem. Those demographics will not be destiny if we do not crack the code on that. And this is what it looks like to crack the code. We're going to have to create this segmentation with young people. We're going to have to figure out what are the values and issues and beliefs that are making them click. And this, again, is a good use of polling. We came up with these 5 segments. The first 2 are the most democratic voters in America. The legacy civil rights voters are older, over the age of 50, mostly over the age of 60. Most likely Democrats, most likely voters. The second one, aspirational activists, are younger women who are activated by everything. Also very likely Democrats, but also highest per capita income, highest educational attainment, and literally will march and mobilize and vote and donate over every issue: economic justice, reproductive justice, environmental justice. They mobilize. These middle 2 are where we're losing. I can't spend enough time on this slide. I could do 30 minutes just on this slide. These middle 2 groups, I'm just going to say this real quick. They look just alike by demographics, and this is why this kind of work is important and where polling is very valuable. Again, I have to defend whether this industry should exist after every election. Because they look just alike by demographics. They're all under the age of 50. They're all black. They're equally men and women. If we just are just cutting turfs by demos, these 2 groups are the exact same turf. But when you look at them by their values, there's something up here called vote power. You're not going to be able to see it very closely, but the second bullet on the legacy civil rights vote power is 8 out of 10. I'm going to tell you what that means in a second. I'm scattered because I'm trying to get all of it out real quick. The black and yellow groups here, the next-gen optimists and the rightfully cynics, what separates them is not their demographics. It's not their gender or their age. It's not even their voting patterns, because they all have voted in less than 2 of the last 3 elections. What separates them are their attitudes towards voting. The next-gen optimists have a 7 out of 10 vote power, almost the same as legacy civil rights. That means that they believe that their votes have power. That means that they believe in the agency of their vote. So why are they missing 2 out of 3 elections? because they just forgot. They're just busy. They think they voted in every election. When I ask them in focus groups, how often do you vote? They say, I never miss an election. I say, when's the last time you voted? They say, 2016. They didn't even know that there were 4 elections. You know what I mean? Like they just, and then when I tell them that there was a primary last week, they're pissed off that nobody told them. You know? That's an actual GOTV universe. Well, the rightfully cynical voter, look at their vote power, 3 out of 10. They don't believe their vote has agency. They don't believe voting will make a difference in their lives. They don't care about voting. They hate both parties. They didn't forget to vote. They don't care. The interventions for those two groups are drastically different. And if we continue to treat them the same, we will continue to lose them both. All right, this is vote power. This is a question that we ask on every poll. This is what I was just referencing. That tells us a lot about how people perceive their agency. We ask it on every poll, regardless of how often you vote, how much power do you believe your vote has to make a difference in your community? The higher they rate those perceptions of power, the more likely they are to vote. As we see here, we have seen a diminishing, an erosion in these perceptions of power over time. And this is the work that you all do. It is agency, it is self-determination. A part of that is extending the cycle of power beyond just voting, that voting is only a part of their power, but in fact they also have negotiating power to move people along toward their issues. They have accountability and protest power. Young people really like that one. We're about to be using a lot of that one for the next 4 years. In fact, I would venture that I can just change the name of the third one to resistance power for the next 4 years. That's what it is. The power to prevent pain. And then finally, you have punitive power to fire people. They really, really, really like that one. We have to extend those cycles of power. Real quick, I just want to show you what actually happened in this election. Some people have seen this map. It's been making its way around media. The red arrows are how much those precincts moved to the right. The blue arrows are how much those precincts moved to the left. The blue arrows are hard to find, right? Because wasn't nobody moving to the left in this election, except for right around Atlanta. Right here. There's a lot of blue arrows right around Atlanta. The 10 counties around Atlanta moved to the left more than anywhere else in the country. That is a testament to the work that's being done in Georgia. Seriously, that is a lot of work. But contrary to what this looks like, it wasn't the blowout that it appears to be. In fact, there's a lot of perception that Democrats just didn't show up, young people didn't show up, black folks didn't show up. In fact, in many of the battleground states where we lost, Kamala Harris got more votes than Joe Biden got. In Georgia, in Nevada, North Carolina, Wisconsin, she got more votes than Joe Biden got when he won those states. Donald Trump has a unique ability to mobilize his electorate. He speaks to his voters and he mobilizes them. So even while Democrats got more votes, even while Kamala Harris got more votes than Joe Biden in 4 of the seven battleground states, enough to win the election, she lost all 4 of those states. Here's what it looks like over time. This is just the Democratic margin. I got to step down so I can see this real quick. All right, Democratic margin over time. If we see, I just want you to look at from 2020 to 2024, because there are some misperceptions here about who shifted, right? Black folks are the top line. Kamala Harris did 1% worse than Joe Biden with black voters. They basically held the line. Latino voters, the orange line, 17 points worse amongst Latino voters. We got work to do. AAPI voters, the green line, 8% worse than Joe Biden. We have work to do. The first AAPI candidates in history did 8 points worse than Scranton Joe. White voters didn't move. In fact, if you look at this line over time, back 24 years, White voters don't move that much. Why is that so important to me? Because I worked on a campaign that spent $1 billion. $1 billion, that is disgusting, and I worked for the campaign. No one should be able to raise $1 billion in 30 days, because who the hell is buying our White House? But even over time, you know, it's not just that we spent $1 billion, it's who we spent that $1 billion on. Because campaigns typically spend what they call general market, which also means white. Or when you're spending all that money on one demographic that literally moved 0 points from 2020 to 2024, then what the hell are we burning this? Why are we burning this money on fire? What does it look like when you break it out by gender? Very, very similar. Black women went up 1 point, black men went down 2 points. Latino women went down 8 points, Latino men went down 19 points. White voters didn't move. Finally, last slide, just to show that this was not a complete wipeout of Democrats, that this is not a repudiation of identity politics. Democrats, in fact, did much better than Kamala Harris in every state. In every state. Democrats down ballot overperformed Kamala Harris. There's a different problem here. There's a different question that we're not asking. There's a different conversation that we're not having. We can continue to ignore things like sexism, wag our finger at them, or we could engage them in a real conversation about where the country is going and what their place is in it. Thank you all so much.